Hey guys, so Sunday market breakdown. This is looking really nice. So there's a few possible scenarios with the DXY. What I'm looking at right now is I'm looking for a corrective approach to the high, but bear in mind we don't need that at all. Okay, this can turn into a few things. This can just, kind of just trickle and make its way up, and then we get something a little bit like this, to the high. There's just a few scenarios. I mean, the main thing we're looking for is when we get to this high, is there any sort of possibilities that we can be taking a short? And if we are able to take a short, we'll take a short. But right now, looking at the DXY pairs across the board, we are looking at a short-term short now. I'm looking at this potentially just correctively squeeze lower whilst a lot of the US pairs kind of just drop off. Reason being for that is it's going to give us that opportunity to kind of fill some gaps on the other US related pairs before we do make that bullish move. And then once this kind of corrects, gets a bit higher and drops off, then it kind of just works in line with the other US related pairs. So that's basically what I'm kind of looking at on the USD front. I'm quite excited, to be fair, for next week because, a lot of the pairs that I have on watch, there are very patient structured approaches. So for that reason, it kind of just paints it to be a little bit of a better sort of trading week next week for myself, but we'll see how it goes. So jumping into the watch list, the first one is USD CAD. Now, USD CAD is looking really nice. What we have is on the daily, we basically have been kind of squeezing lower to this double bottom zone. Now, do we kind of drop off now, or do we kind of correct a little bit further and then drop off? Now, what I'm currently looking at over here is we've tapped into the override, then we've approached with a 1, 2, 3. What I'm looking for is if we can potentially just drop off from here, that will be somewhat of more interest to me. So what I want to see right now is this override zone has been tapped into, and we did have a structured approach, extended, tapped into it, push down, aggressive push down, and then on the 4 hour we can see that we've had that sort of drop off. On the daily, even though that it's ended slightly bullish, in no means does that mean that it can't drop off. So the daily, we can see it here that we do have a bullish high test now. As a low high test, but in the bullish form. So it's not ideally our best sort of weekly candle. However, given the scenario, this can still just correct and drop off, or we could just see some sort of spike up and then drop off, an M-star sort of style. So I'll keep that in mind, but bear in mind that this has enough validity right now for it to have enough selling momentum. So I would bear in mind these little inflection points over here, just because, price can always get a little bit more aggressively bullish depending on what's happening with the USD DXY, dollar basket. So, just bear in mind of these inflection points here, because we can just kind of drop off, tap into that and get a little bit bigger and get a bit messier. But the probability of this kind of doing that is quite low at the point. I think with this in mind, if we do get this flag and we start to aggressively push off, we could just come in and fill this gap and tap the low. So I think that's the gameplay I'm really looking for. And in terms of like a risk reward, there's definitely good potential for, even if you were to take it at 18 pip stop loss, it's not bad for a 13% to the low. And then if you wanted to even be a little bit more aggressive, you could probably squeeze in a little bit more. But if you want to be on the protective side, you could definitely be looking at roughly around about a 50 pip stop loss, but then you're looking at roughly around about 5% position. So 1 for 5 in this scenario, not really your best sort of risk reward. However, in terms of protection, it's definitely there. So however you want to protect yourself is up to you. I definitely would say that, a reduced risk is definitely still a good position. You'd be looking at roughly a 6%, but you'd be feeling a little bit more protected. But if the 1, 2, 3 is there, definitely the risk entry is definitely on the table. Just understand with what risk it comes into, because we do have that daily close like this, so we can just kind of push up again before we drop off. But it's unlikely at this point, given the scenario that we could just drop off aggressively. So those are the things that I'll keep in mind for USD CAD. Moving on to Euro New Zealand, which I think is a phenomenal instrument at the moment. A reason being for is we kind of approached with a 1, 2, 3, and then we have a pattern within a pattern meeting with an override section. Now, if we look on the higher time frame on the weekly, we can see that we're basically just squeezing between this 1, 2, 3 to this override point, to this section over here. whereas this can easily extend and tap into this hook point. We definitely have, potential for this to be a monstrosity of a trade. This can drop off aggressively and end up down here. And if it does come down here, this still can be a possible scenario where this from here to here actually ends up coming down to here. So, bear in mind that there's a few possibilities, but positioning yourself in the sequence of impulse, correction, continuation to the downside, it makes sense. Now, the reason why I would assume that it could potentially come to this section here is if you take this point here to this point and you match it up here, it somewhat comes up and meets with this low. So for that reason, it's very possible that we could tap into this and then this becomes ever so much like that. And then because of that, we then ask ourselves, is this the possible game scenario where we impulse, correction, continuation? Now, it doesn't have to do that. Of course, as we know, we can still just get more corrective and a bit messy, but like I said, there's a very good shorting opportunity right now on the table. 1 2 3, we have a 1 2 3 squeeze, easier to see on the 1 hour. As we can see, we have a pattern within a pattern. We can see that leading up to the structure we had this, and now we've pushed up. The better case scenario trade for better protection is wait for the push down and then the larger 1 hour flag and then get involved on the short. However, right now there's a potential that this can do two things. As there's a lot of orders stacked in this order, in this area, we can potentially see price do this and it kind of just pushes up one more time before we drop off, and then we get this furthermore sort of pattern squeeze. I don't think this is the most probable sort of outcome, but it's a possibility, and then we basically get a new 1 2 3 at the top of this, and then that's basically the point where we've really clearly broken above and then pushed lower. However, there's more than enough right now for us to drop off from here, so we don't really need to wait for more. You can set a reduced risk entry if you really want to, which I think is not really a bad decision, where you can just kind of take this price in here, put your reduced risk over there, 40 pips, and then if you're taking it to the low of this pattern, you're roughly looking at around about 10% position on the table. So for a 40 pip position, that's not bad. And then obviously bear in mind there could be scaling opportunities, or most definitely will be. So Euro and USD, honestly, phenomenal pair to be having on watch next week. I think definitely keep your eye on that pair if you do have it on watch, because it's going to be phenomenal once it commits. Next one is Aussie New Zealand dollar. So Aussie New Zealand's not near enough ready, but it's very close, hence the reason I've got it on watch list. I've got my alert set for the override section for as soon as we tap into that. I definitely want to be by the charts. We can see that we've approached with a 1 2 and potentially a 3. Even with a larger structure, we are meeting with the 1 2 3. It's not a coincidence that these both meet in the same area, so I would be very much keeping my eye on an impulse up and a push down, being aware that the RO3 could be impulsive given the scenario that these two are quite far up. Impulsive push up, impulsive push back down, flag, and I'm in for the trade. Nice and simple, honestly, very nice and simple. Aussie Japanese yen. Aussie Japanese yen, similar situation. We have a inflection point which I've marked as an override because it's somewhat more significant, easier to see on the daily, and we're basically approaching this in this sort of form. Now there's two ways I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this either in this scenario, 1 2 3, and then we kind of push up and just push down without tapping into the third touch, or is this the 1 2 3? So I'm not going to really just kind of guess with this. I don't really mind. This is obviously a possible scenario as well, where hence the reason why we just get a push up and a push back down, but it's not my typical sort of 1 2 3. There's no clear middle section for me to really look at that, so I've just kind of put it in like this, and I'll wait and see. We could move to override 2 very easily, so I'm not going to be very hands-on with this one just because there's a lot of corrective price on the left hand side. But if we can just kind of push up, push back down, create a flag, I could be looking for a very nice short play to this low, bearing in mind we are coming from the low and pushing up aggressively, so we can continue and move up in a bullish momentum. So easily I can turn around and stay neutral on this one. GBP yen on the other hand is one that I think is absolutely phenomenal. What we have is we have this sort of larger section here, but I'll go to the weekly quickly, and what we can see here is that even though we are correctively moving up, we've been correctively squeezing in this area here, which just happens to be above this section here. So if I just take this override section here and we just see above, we pushed above, and then we can see we tapped into these inflection points, and then basically we just came in with a 1 2 3. Now In terms of what's actually happening, we can see that we've had an aggressive push low. We created a flag over here, and then we had a next flag push down, and then we have a large flag as well. And once again, in the sequence, there isn't really any sort of inflection points for us to gravitate towards, which I do like. I do like the fact that right now we are basically just hovering below that override. What I would like to see is, because we didn't get any commitment rejecting from the near miss override here, we kind of pushed down and corrected a little bit, and now we're pulling back up. I would like to see some sort of structured approach so that I can get involved on a retrace, or some sort of risky entry in that area, because that could be very valuable. However, I'll be more than happy to wait for the push down and flag in either or scenario, because I think regardless of the position to the low, there's a massive sort of room to actually trade in, and that's a 70 pip stop loss that I've marked on there, so that's pretty large. If I lower that down and we look at it and be a bit more realistic, let's say 30, it's very much possible that this run could be 44%. And if we do get a tighter stop loss, even with scale, we're looking at something like, let's say in the region of, being more realistic, 13, 14, 15, could be looking, well, that's 100%. Haven't seen figures like that in a long time, but this is the realistic sort of figures that you could be looking at if you were to position yourself correctly. It doesn't have to be at the top, it could be somewhere lower in, but even so, there's a phenomenal play to be made on GBP yen. So definitely I'm going to be keeping my eye on that, because that's going to be one of the most prime positions that I'll be looking at for next week. Next one is CAD yen. Now CAD yen did have a bit of an extension here, and we have correctively been moving. Now there's a few scenarios that I am looking at, because we do have a head and shoulders here, and it is just above structure, and we haven't really pulled back in yet. So I want to look for the most protected position possible, especially that I'll be taking this on a funded account. I want to be making sure that I've got enough room to protect myself. So the head and shoulders was definitely there, one I was eyeing up, but it wasn't one that I wanted to take. So I think I'll wait for that significant push down, break below the line in the sand, and then if there's a flag over here, I can take that and take that for a short to this low and then further. If this does continue to correct, then I haven't actually missed out on anything, and I've got into a better position where it could lead up here. So this would be the scenario where I really want to get involved, but if this happens, then I'll be getting involved here as well. And that's basically plain and simple for my CAD yen trade. In terms of market direction, we're still very high up in structure, and there's so much room to be getting involved on future opportunities. So I wouldn't really be worried about missing any trades this week and so forth, because there'll be so much more opportunity on the way down. It's really not really much of a bother if you do miss them or not, because honestly you'll be getting in on the bigger run when it's actually ready to commit. So that's basically it for CAD yen. The next one I'll be looking at is my wildcards, which is New Zealand yen. Now I think New Zealand yen still has a bit of a corrective push in it. Now there's a potential counter buy position here, which is quite funny, because on Monday last week there was the counter buy position in here, right? And now we have the counter buy position, counter buy position in there. And then now we have the counter buy position in here. So is this the possibility where I can take a potential long position to go to the high? I'm not quite sure if this is the one I want to entertain. I mean, looking at how it's shaping up, it's definitely a possibility. However, I am looking for something a little bit more parallel. I mean, the thing is, right, I have this section over here, which kind of is somewhat parallel to this. So in many ways I think this could be enough, really and truly this could be enough. But if we did get something a little bit more where it kind of just pushed below and then pulled back up, that would be more favorable in my opinion. However, all in all, I'm not too concerned about taking this long position. If we can get enough momentum throughout next week and we can make it up here and push back down, that's the gameplay I want to be taking. So that's what I really want to be waiting for. If there's a position in there that's a bit of lower quality in my opinion, because there's not enough clarity in there, but we did kind of create these two floor bottoms, and if we go to the 4 hour, you can see it's a little bit more clear in terms of, this sort of flag to the upside. We had the corrective squeeze, solid push up, breaking out of this trend. So we broke the trend line, we pushed up aggressively, and now we're creating continuation. This would be a no-brainer trade to take to the upside. However, you have to understand the risk it holds, because this can still kind of just catch you out on the wrong side, push a bit lower and go. But knowing how this pair has been performing and how the characteristics are, I would say that a trade in here is not a bad trade at all. Just understand that it does hold a little bit of risk. And that's basically what my outlook is for New Zealand yen. I think New Zealand yen is going to be stunning. I think it's going to be one of the best pairs that we do have on board, as well as GBP yen, Euro New Zealand, and honestly, so many phenomenal pairs. But definitely keep your eye on this one for sure, because at least when we get up to here, we're going to be seeing some very, very nice gameplay. Next one I've got is USD yen. Now, USD yen is a little bit of a tricky one because we can obviously see that there's a near miss gap to this low. Structurally, this has been phenomenal. Now, obviously, what I want to see is price rejects, creates these tight 15-minute flags that we know from looking at previous data on this pair that these small corrections tend to be very profitable. However, we have to understand that it comes with a bit of risk as well, because at the moment we do have a lot of bullish momentum in the market, but there's a possibility that if the DXY gets corrective and starts to drop off, then we could see similar price action across the board with the US pairs. Whereas we're seeing USD CAD with the potential short position, we're seeing USD yen now with the potential short position as well. So these two would be no coincidence that they could both be dropping off. Positioning ourselves would be very, very strategic, and we can see that they both need the similar sort of price action to go. So if I was to pick one between them, I think USD yen would be my more preferable one, in my opinion, just because I know that this can aggressively drop off compared to a few other pairs. However, understand that this can still go, just, you know, drip and then kind of just pull back up. So there's a few scenarios. We are seeing some head and shoulders across the board as well, so I would be very, very mindful about head and shoulder patterns, just because we are seeing quite a few of them shaping up, like CAD yen, for example, and so forth. So keep that in mind, but there could be some phenomenal gameplays across the board right now. The next one I will be looking at is USD Swiss. USD Swiss, similar situation once again to USD yen and USD CAD. No coincidence, I am looking for it to basically create this corrective right shoulder, and then basically just taps into that left shoulder, and then we sell off, and that could be a very, very profitable gameplay to be looking at to that low. So I think that's one to definitely keep your eyes on for sure, because that could be somewhat of a monster trade. Obviously, looking at it with 21 pips or odd, more could be more. You know, we could be seeing around about 10+% position. And if we just look on the high time frame, you know, we haven't even really come down to this inflection, this major low point, and there's a few inflection points on the way, but this zone here, this could be enough for us to just really drop off and then somewhat be down here before we create one more flag to the downside. So like I said, positioning ourselves right now is very key, but it's looking great, and the daily close on USD Swiss is phenomenal. Honestly, that is a monster candle. I mean, realistically, if you really wanted to, you could probably stop crop this ever so much to about there, call it about 80 pips, and then to that low. You know, even if you're trading a large account size, you could be taking a position like that. You'd be well protected, and it's not a bad position. But anyway, just looking at this USD Swiss, it's looking very nice. And then we've got New Zealand CAD. Now, New Zealand CAD, I'm basically looking for this, and I'm just going to invert the chart quickly. So press Control I to invert the chart, just flips it upside down. Essentially, I'm just looking for this. So I want to see price kind of in this large structure come in, tap the top, and then sort of pull down, push down, and then carry on here. So obviously in the other scenario, we're upside down. This is how we'll be looking the bull flag. We've basically kind of broken out of all of this sort of price here, which I do like. And now we're just creating the same thing, just in a smaller sort of price here. So I'll be waiting extra patient for price to just push down, but being aware that if we do break above this and correct and then move up, I could be looking for the long position quite sooner than I think. But more so, I'd be looking for that 1, 2, 3 to that low, and I think that'll be a much more probable trade, understanding that if I do take a long here, we could tap into this sort of point here and then drop off again. So those are the sort of scenarios that I'll be looking at, but more so the 1, 2, 3 low over there would be the gameplay for me. And last but not least is Euro Aussie. Euro Aussie honestly is absolutely phenomenal. Now, what we can see here is that obviously we've been correcting, we've been squeezing, but then over here we've had this sort of corrective 1 2 3 to the trend line, and then we corrected and then we pushed away. Now the only thing that I'm looking at is that we correctively moved away, however we're structurally moving back to the left shoulder. So left shoulder meets with the right shoulder. If we come back over here, this could be a very, very beautiful head and shoulders pattern in a very good area for us to take a short play, which could be a monster trade. This could even turn out to be 70% trade, honestly. So positioning ourselves very strategically and very smart could be a very, very nice thing for our portfolios. I think being extra patient, just holding some capital back for this trade could be very, very good for you. So looking at this 1 2 3, I think this could turn out to be a very phenomenal trade. It could turn out to be a bit sooner, could tap into the override and sell off from there, or we might even extend. But looking at override 2, which meets with the 1 2 3, this could be more than enough, but we are squeezing at the moment, so bear in mind that the override 1 could be the one to go. This honestly will be a monster for trade. GBP yen will be a great trade, USD yen, Euro New Zealand dollar, USD CAD. Honestly, so many stunning pairs on watch at the moment. This is the time where you want to be active as a trader. But yeah, so you know, if you're not active as a trader, you need to get these lessons in here. So have a good week, guys. Catch you in the next video. This was the Sunday market breakdown, and if you have any questions, please drop a comment below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button. And yeah, wicked. Have a good weekend.